Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
SportsTalk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome back to another new episode of The Lager Line, again served to you courtesy of Clutch City Lager of Carbox Brewing. I'm Ben Dubose, your host, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire, and contributor to Sports Talk 790, official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. I'm joined again by Paulo Alves, our co-host and producer out of Portugal. You can follow him on Twitter /X at Paulo Alves NBA, and me at Ben Dubose. As I'm sure our audience is aware, September is the slowest month on the calendar when it comes to NBA hoops. So we've been doing some outside-of-the-box things here on the pod. A couple episodes ago, which you can find in our Lager Line archives, we had the panel episode for the all-time Rockets draft. And then in our most recent show, we started a Meet the Broadcasters series, trying to give you all some behind-the-scenes intel about the folks who are going to be narrating the coverage of live Rockets basketball this season. We started that series with Vanessa Richardson of Space City Home Network, and we're continuing that today with Matt Thomas, radio play-by-play voice of the Rockets, and also host of the Matt Thomas Show, which runs each weekday on Sports Talk 790 from noon until 3 p.m. Central. You can stream it on sports790.com. So, Matt, thanks for coming on, and let's start you with this. I just saw you a couple of days ago at the grand opening of the new Rockets Training Center. It's the latest in what I think we can consider a wave of investments by Tilman Fertitta. They're renovating Toyota Center now. It's 20 years old. They've got the luxurious new plane, which I know you travel on with the team during the season. And now you've got this $70+ million practice facility. So for anybody unaware, Matt is often referred to as Fancy Matt for his insistence on staying in 5-star hotels. So with that in mind, by Fancy Matt standards, how nice is the new facility, and do you buy that it potentially provides, some sort of competitive advantage to the team?
I don't know necessarily if it means it's a competitive advantage to teams. I can just tell you that other players would be turned off if they went to other cities and try to compare it to what the Rockets have done. I mean, as you saw, Ben, the other day, it's a Taj Mahal of practice facilities. I mean, there is nothing that they didn't think about, from office space to training space to the kitchen to the basketball courts to the pools to the locker room. And you have to do it that way. And it's happening in college athletics. It's happening in all the professional sports teams. And with how crazy NBA free agency is, and it's maybe my favorite time of the year is to see who's talking to whom and whatnot. Number one, don't mistake this. Money drives everything. But if you're in a situation where you are thinking about 3 or 4 teams and the contract offers are similar, they're going to go to the intangibles: ownership, general manager, city, travel accommodations, where they're going to live. All those little things will make a difference. And I can tell you from watching Tilman and the organization put in hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that the intangibles, in their mind, the Rockets win that battle every single time. So I applaud them for that. And as a person that enjoys the Fancy Matt life, it is definitely as fancy as it gets. Although when I was taking the tour the other day, I was still looking for the Matt Thomas suite inside this facility and have yet to find it.
I'm sure they have it. They just haven't. It's so special that it took a little bit longer for them to.
There were some offices that didn't have names on them yet, so I'm sure one of those.
So I've got a fighter's chance. Then I got it. I appreciate that.
I just wanted to touch on before Ben goes on to the next question. I actually read, so just a shout out to Rockets Reddit, since I started there very early on. Someone was doing an AMA, and apparently it was someone that worked with the company that took care of constructing the whole facility. And apparently there's an analytics system called NOAA in it that tracks average sprint speed of players. It alerts coaches if guys aren't practicing, they're not giving it their all. It tracks on jump shots. It tracks arc release timing, consistency, sprint, shuffle speed, vertical, amongst other things. Apparently, it's like this state-of-the-art thing that I don't think many other teams have. And yeah, I think it just goes to show a little bit of, that could be a real edge, especially on a team like the Rockets. If getting to basketball a little bit, Jalen struggling with his jump shot. I mean, that's the biggest question mark with him. Sengun obviously would be an even greater player if he had a better jump shot. I think it's incredible that to win specific. I think it's worth singling out because playing facility is a training facility. It's obviously important, but having those edges might make a difference in the long term.
Sure, and I have the PR in front of me. The part of it that really stood out to me was whether the attempt was off the dribble or from a catch and shoot. I mean, that is crazy detail for a tracking system at a practice facility. And it's funny, a lot of these things, there's also like a GPS tracking type setup. And Tilman mentioned during the press conference that he wasn't even sure what that was, yet he did green light it anyway. And that's where I want to bring Matt in because, Matt, I think you have a better knowledge of Tilman. This is sort of your wheelhouse, I feel like, relative to most people in Houston sports media. You have a better knowledge of Tilman Fertitta than almost anyone because you know him on multiple fronts. Obviously, you work with him in a Rockets capacity where you're one of the faces or voices of coverage of the team, but you also know him from being a University of Houston aficionado and how closely you've watched his oversight of that university and specifically the Cougars athletic program over the last 10 to 15 years. So what does the average person following the Rockets or just casually consuming Houston sports not know about Tilman that maybe they should? And how does this maybe play into that?
That's an interesting question. I have known Tilman for a very long period of time, going back to even when I was the PA announcer in the early 90s and he was a small owner of the team. I would not say we have conversations daily, monthly. I may talk to him once or twice per year. Frankly, he's got so many different things that he's involved with, from his restaurants, casinos, the hotels, the team. There's never a need for me to get involved with anything or except to say hello. Same thing with his kids. They're all great. But it's not like he and I are texting buddies.
All right. I just mean you followed him for a while. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I will tell you this, and it was mentioned, I think, in a Texas Monthly article years ago when Tilman bought the team, is that I was in Dallas at the Big 12 Media Days doing my radio show, and I got an email from the Rockets saying that Tad Brown, who was the president at the time, is going to have a press conference. And it was in the middle of summertime, and, the Rockets wouldn't have a press conference in the middle of summertime, especially because free agency had already come and gone and whatnot. And through the grapevine, just getting a little whisper here and there, I had heard that Leslie Alexander was going to sell the Rockets. I texted Tilman immediately. I mean, within 2 minutes, and I said, "You've got to go buy this team." And he texted me back and he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Tad Brown's about to have a press conference saying that he's going to sell the team." So very, very indirectly did I spill the beans to Tilman that said the team was up for sale. So that's kind of a little interesting anecdote all those years ago. But as far as Tilman is concerned, I think he works hard. I think he demands a lot from anybody, from people that work at his casinos to his restaurants to employees of the Houston Rockets. And I think he's willing to spend money to get to that point. I honestly, and I'm not trying to say this because I'm sitting there looking at his portfolio, but it feels like everything that Tilman touches, it turns out to be a success, whether it's opening up a new restaurant, a new hotel, buying real estate. So he knows the little things that have to happen. He knows that, you have to get free agents here. You have to have smart people in your front office. You have to have good drafts. You have to be able to spend money and take the time to just build a franchise. And, as he has said ad nauseum, Ben, it was a difficult decision when I think Rafael and Patrick went to him and said, "We're going to have to break this thing up because we're going to be sitting here at 42-40 for the rest of our life unless we absolutely clean house and start from scratch." And so a lot of owners wouldn't want to do that because a lot of owners would say, well, then I'm going to win 20 games a year and I'm going to have 8,000 people in my building. So, that has been a painful transition because think about it. If you're Tilman, don't normally have to wait 4 or 5 or 6 years for your investment to pay off. When the Post Oak Hotel opened up in the Galleria, it became clearly the most luxurious hotel and the place to be in Houston in a very short period of time. You didn't have to wait 4 or 5 years for the word to spread. So I think probably in this respect, you have to teach patience when it's an NBA team, because there's a lot of things you can't control, whether it's drafts, whether it's free agency, whether it's a salary cap. So I would say I see a different side to him as an owner of an NBA team as compared to saying an owner being involved with the University of Houston, where the Cougar basketball program was in desperate need of an arena, and Hofheinz Pavilion was one of the 2 or 3 top reasons why we were not getting good recruits to the University of Houston. And he said, "Look, we need a major upgrade in our arena. We need to be a palace. We need to be as comparable to anybody else in America." A la the Fertitta Center was built, and now it's one of the best places in college basketball for not only fans to be there, but players to come play their games. So I would say it's probably, he'd admit it, it's nothing like anything else he owns in life, because if you open up a restaurant and you serve good food and you and have good service, word's going to travel fast. The NBA doesn't work that way. So to me, it's been interesting to see how they have been very, very patient, and I think the patience is going to eventually pay off. It's just been really difficult, especially in those first 3 years, how lean it got and how times were so tough, because the city has been so acclimated to winning, lots of basketball games and going deep in the playoffs, where, think about it now, it's been 4 straight seasons without any playoff appearances.
He did get some criticism his first couple of years owning the Rockets, and in some respects, he came into a difficult situation, because when he bought the team in 2017, it was a ready-made contender with 2 guys in James Harden and Chris Paul who were at the peak of their powers. So in some ways, it was a situation where, relative to what he inherited, it was almost inevitable that if they didn't win a championship, there was going to be some slippage. We know how the modern NBA works. Within a couple of years, James Harden wanted out, and the rest is history. That led to the rebuild that you were just describing. But he did get some criticism in those years for not paying the luxury tax. Now, I will say, in fairness to Tilman, some of the guys he didn't pay the luxury tax for turned out to maybe not be, for basketball reasons, the investment that people at the time believed they would be. Luc Mbah a Moute, after that great 2018 season, pretty much never played in the NBA again because of injuries. Trevor Ariza, the Rockets let him go. He was never the same guy after 2018, probably because he's in his low to mid-30s age-wise at that point. So maybe it's not all tax-related. Maybe some of it's basketball-related and just age, slippage. But regardless, he got some criticism. And so because of that, there's a corner of the fan base that wonders, okay, when this team gets to a contending level a few years from now, will he pay to keep this team together? Yet I look at these recent investments, like the practice facility, like the plane. None of these are investments that are required to be made by an owner. He is making them proactively. Even the hire of Ime Udoka. Look, Toronto wanted to hire Ime Udoka. Brooklyn almost hired him a few months before that. Ime had other offers. If he was getting a lowball salary, he would not be here. He is here. So we've seen time and time again, in my opinion, that Tilman is willing to spend. And so I don't say that to push back on the luxury tax and say that it's a non-issue. It is. But I do think, well, it was an issue at least, but I think that maybe some of this is just a new owner learning what it takes at the NBA level, learning what he can and can't get away with. And now 5, 6, 7 years into his ownership tenure, maybe he knows now what he has to do spending-wise to get the results that he wants. Matt, do you sort of agree with that framing? What's your thought on, I guess, how Tilman has evolved from his first couple of years as an owner to the guy he is right now?
Well, the reality is this, and I don't know about the finances and the luxury tax and all that kind of thing. You guys are much more in the weeds on that than I am. I will say this. There's probably a segment that, first of all, there's nobody in the Rockets community right now that has to be sitting here in 2024 going, oh my God, if only Tilman would have spent $1 more to get over the threshold. That's the difference between the Rockets, dethroning the Golden State Warriors and not. The reality is this. If you were a Rockets fan late 2010s, you either thought that James Harden was the greatest player on earth, or James Harden would never be capable of ever leading a team to a playoff series, deep run, championship level. So it depends on, frankly, Ben, what segment of the population you're talking to in terms of whether or not Tilman made some early mistakes. So all I would say is, regardless of whether or not people were watching Tilman and whether he was considered penny pinching or just said, I'm not going to go over the threshold, that's a debate for economists in the NBA. I look at it strictly from a basketball perspective as someone that calls the games and talks about on the radio. Was that team good enough in the late 2010s to make that championship run? Of course. The number one thing we always talk about is whether Chris Paul's hamstrings would have stood up, would they have been able to beat Golden State? And, I'm going to be purely selfish and say the answer is yes on that. But I don't think anybody that looks at those days when they were winning 50, 55, 60 games thought the Rockets under any circumstance were considered cheap. The Rockets were ready to bring in guys. They still had Eric Gordon. They still had P.J. Tucker. They still had James Harden, Trevor Ariza. They went and got Chris Paul. They went and eventually got Russell Westbrook. So I think somebody that's got an accountant's point of view on what the Rockets did during that time, especially in Tilman's early run as an owner, is a little short-sighted. It comes down to, did your alpha dog, did your type A, was he the guy that was going to lead it? And again, if you love James Harden and thinks he can do no wrong, you think, well, just a bad opportunity that slipped away. If you are not in the James Harden camp, or not in the Chris Paul camp, or not the Russell Westbrook camp, you were thinking to yourself, this is a Rockets team just throwing darts against a wall, hoping that something sticks. So I don't see him being overly different. I don't think that if Ime was to go to him and say, look, I want to go get XYZ player at the trade deadline, if this team is close on making a playoff run, or maybe even being top 4 or 5 in the Western Conference, I can't imagine at this point that Patrick and Tilman would say no to that because of a potential salary tax issue.
I think as the years went along and as we saw more of James Harden's career, even though he is one of my favorite players because I got into the NBA watching him, I think ultimately, the Chris Paul injury was a much bigger problem than, whatever. I think what most people will point to at this point will be, maybe a couple first round picks that we used thumping players that perhaps we could have used elsewhere. But to make the argument that would be the difference between us overcoming Golden State or not, I think the Chris Paul injury was much bigger than that. But since I was going to steer this to, what you do as a play-by-play announcer on radio and TV, but I'll actually hold off on that since we're talking basketball at this point. You divided, the fan base into the people who believe that James Harden could do it as the best player and the people who don't. I wonder how you feel about the current crop of young guys, and perhaps, I think the first answer might be obvious, but who you think has the potential and who might be most likely to eventually become that guy, or if you are more pessimistic about it, maybe you don't think there's anybody here that could become that, but I'll leave it open to you.
Puddle, the reality is there's no one player that's going to take a team to a championship. There are so many layers in the NBA, and maybe we spent too much time as NBA historians saying it was just Michael Jordan in Chicago. That's not the case. It was clearly Tony Kukoc and Scottie Pippen and B.J. Armstrong and Dennis Rodman. Clearly the Lakers Showtime teams were not just Kareem or not just Magic. The Laker teams, while again Larry Bird was the main go-to guy, you had Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish. So I think we as basketball fans have to stop thinking about, well, do the Rockets have that number one guy? The reality is you're going to need 3 number one guys, or at least 1A, 1B, 1C, whatever the case would be. And you got to have a nice supporting cast. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I think you're probably trying to figure out, is Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun that guy? Honestly, I don't think you have to worry about that. The question is going to be ultimately, and that'll be up for Ime to decide, is do those two guys together possess the ability to be the 1-2 punch that you're going to need to go compete against, Devin Booker and Kevin Durant in the Western Conference? Is it Anthony Davis and LeBron in Los Angeles? Is it, Steph Curry and company in Golden State? That remains to be seen. I like both of their games. Are there Are they perfect? Under no circumstance they are. But there are some intangibles with both of those guys that make me think, wow, I can't wait to see what these guys do in the next couple of years. So what I will do is, as a sports talk host, and certainly as a broadcaster for the Rockets, is I look at the complete cast. I want to see if Amen Thompson becomes this player that we saw back half of the year where you can put him in 4 or 5 different spots. Does Reed Shepherd step up and become this jump shooting machine the Rockets have been desperately looking for the last handful of years? What's it like with Fred and Dylan one more year together? Does Alpi put it together where he is, I hate the term mini Jokic. I think it's just our junior Jokic, whatever you're hearing. I that's not fair to Jokic, and it's not fair to Alpi. I want them to be themselves. And then ultimately, the month and a half, 2 months, we saw Jalen Green towards the back half of the year was his best moments as an NBA player. Can he play that for 82 games? So if you give me a little bit of all the things I just said, that's what makes a championship team. Not saying just Alpi is going to take this team to 50 wins or just Jalen Green is going to take this team to 50 wins.
Yeah, 100%. I think actually Jalen Brown, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this week, obviously current NBA champion, he said that the plan for them, and it has been so thus far and will be even more next season, is to play through, obviously they'll play through Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, and then Kristaps Porzingis, but he mentioned that there will be games where they'll play more through Sam Hauser, their three-point shooting specialist, where if he'll let them 10 threes or if he'll let them 15 threes, he'll get 25 points, and it will be the Sam Hauser game. Everybody will say, oh, we just got beaten by Sam Hauser, who's this random role player, but actually the team was designed to, on any given night, be able to feature different guys, not just the stars. And I think the Celtics are a perfect example of a team that, on any given night, I think you could argue that either Jalen Brown or Jason Tatum were the best player on any given night. And sometimes Kristaps Porzingis was a difference maker. And that's, the current NBA champions. You can argue about how difficult their road to getting there was, but it is proven to be a recipe that works. And I hope the Rockets can emulate that a little bit. My follow-up, staying on basketball, and I asked this question of Vanessa as well, and I think this is probably a question that we're going to ask everybody. Gun to your head, do the Rockets make the playoffs, not play-in, playoffs, this next season?
Gun to my head. I am such a fan of Ime Udoka. I have such tremendous respect that I think he is going to get the most out of what this team can be. The West is uber competitive. I'm not going to say top 6, but don't be surprised if they're 7 or 8. Just because the West is so loaded. And while the Rockets, I think, can at least play 500 basketball and hopefully even better, you still want to figure out what Jalen Green is for 82. You still want to figure out Alperen Sengun. You want to figure out if the Reed Shepherd trade is going to pay dividends for looking for that pure jump shooter. But it's not an indictment against the Rockets under any circumstance. It's the fact that you've got to ask 1 or 2 or 3 teams, guys, to fall off, and I kind of need to see that to happen. Does Sacramento take a step back? What's Paul Pierce out of L.A.? What does that mean for them?
Yeah.
Paul Pierce. I was thinking about the Celtics, but Paul George. What is Paul George out of L.A.? What is that like? Are the Lakers? What is Klay Thompson not in Golden State? How much does that impact them? What's left in the Lakers tank in terms of keeping AD healthy on the floor and LeBron James? So if there's anybody in the league that can make that next step and get this team in, I am 100% confident that the Rockets' decision to bring in Ime Udoka a year ago was one of the best things that this organization has done in a very long period of time. And so if there's a coach that can do it, it would be Ime Udoka, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll note that if you can just get to the 7 or 8 seed, that means so much with the way the play-in tournament is constructed, because that gives you 2 games to win 1. So in terms of Paolo's question about actually getting to the playoffs, if you can finish in the top 8 of the West, and maybe the Rockets, because they're so deep, we heard this week that Steven Adams is on track to be a full participant when training camp opens in a few days. Yeah. So all of those are good signs. If the Rockets can get, even if they aren't in the top 6, just get to a 7 or 8 seed, and ultimately you have 2 opportunities to win 1 game to get in the playoffs. At least one of those would be inside the friendly confines of Toyota Center. So that's a pretty good spot. You mentioned Ime Udoka. I want to follow up on that. So besides his abilities as a coach, you also get to know him a little bit as a man. You get the interviews almost every game. In fact, you've done that. Well, when did you take over as radio play-by-play? You split.
This is my 9th year calling radio play-by-play. The first 5 years I did the PA and the at home and the play-by-play on the road, and this is my 4th year of doing it all the way through. So,
and that was the Bill Burrell transition plan when Craig was split between radio and TV, depending on home and road.
Yeah, yeah. So I talked to Ime every single game before the game, and to peel the curtain back, he has a media availability for home games at 5:15 and on road games at 5:30, presuming the games are 7 o'clock. And so as soon as he's done with those media responsibilities, he and I will go into his office or his locker room that he's in on the road, and we'll have a conversation. It's about a 4-minute radio visit for our pregame show. We'll chit-chat a little bit beforehand, a little bit after. That chit-chat's probably 90% basketball and 10% something else. The one thing I have learned with Ime is he's all about business, and I'm okay with that. We'll talk about dinner, seeing friends and family, whatever the case may be, but largely it's, hey, if this player doesn't go tonight for a particular team or your guy doesn't go, what will you do? And it's kind of those little insights that I can get that I can the broadcasts that I can tell you at 7 o'clock when tip time comes on, but sometimes at 5:30 when we're doing these things and there are things up on the air, he would not want them to be broadcast or discussed. So it's just kind of a little behind the scenes stuff. And I think most team broadcasters have that relationship with their coach. I mean, he and I are not going out and having dinner or having beverages on the road, but we have a very good relationship, and he does a weekly segment with me on my radio show during the season, and he's always forthcoming and doesn't mince words. And frankly, I've been very, very blessed. I had so many great seasons, 5 with Mike D'Antoni, 3 with Steven Silas, and then this last year, I'm thinking I'm losing track of years, but maybe 4 with D'Antoni, whatever. And then a year with Coach Udoka. I've had a great relationship with all the coaches, and I've been very blessed that those guys are considered friends, and I've had tremendous respect for all of their jobs. I know that they have different fortunes and different outcomes of each of the coaches, but I do enjoy our little small time with Ime because I get a little bit of insight that I don't normally would get if I was just sitting in a press conference room.
What's different about Ime compared to those other two? And I'll note that I have somewhat of a relationship with them, but not clearly as close as you do. I never got as good of a feel for Steven because a lot of Steven's tenure was during the COVID years where obviously there were more restrictions. I will say with regards to Ime versus Mike, Mike was incredibly personable. And not that Ime isn't, but Ime is much more, as you said, matter of fact. He wants to get down to business. Whereas, Mike, depending on the day, he might small talk you a little bit and, talk about some things other than basketball. Ime, it feels like he is very driven and focused on a day-to-day basis and just always wants to get at whatever that competitive edge is. How would you characterize Ime versus those other two guys?
I think you said it best. Silas was his first time as an NBA head coach, so he's kind of navigating the waters, and you had COVID to mix in. Oh, by the way, he had lost James Harden and Russell Westbrook and trades, and didn't get the kind of basketball team he thought he was inheriting when he took the job. So he's, when Christian Wood is your alpha dog, that doesn't initially mean you're going to be thinking about a deep playoff run. But he was always very personable, very honest, try to be as positive as he could, but he knew the situation was tough. As in D'Antoni's case, D'Antoni had a veteran-laden team. Mike's been there, done that, having coached with, the Lakers and the Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. So, he had been through years and years and years of big-time games. So, he knew at the end of the day that this team was going to go as far as James Harden was going to go, no matter what kind of offense he tried to put in or what kind of presence he asked from his team defensively. It was, this is James's basketball team. He's going to put James and any of the people that James wanted around him in the best possible position to win. And in Ime's case, he's got a young basketball team. He just got a couple of gritty veterans, which I think he wanted because he doesn't want those veteran guys, i.e. Dylan and Fred and Landell to a smaller extent, to kind of step in there. And obviously Jeff Green would be a great example of that, to say, you know what, you guys run your thing, but I still want to have my my foot on this basketball team. I want the direction, I want the culture, I want the intensity. And so if Ime's not going to crack jokes, that's not a personal aside to you or any relationship you would have with him. He's just going to be just hyper focused. And for a basketball team that is on the cusp of really, I think, making some serious inroads in the NBA and especially the Western Conference, I'm all for that.
Especially with a team this young, we needed that, especially because of how much it contrasts with what we had with Stephen Silas. But I'll take the opportunity to ask you about, obviously you said you were a PA announcer earlier on, and then you moved on to the play-by-play radio.
Yeah.
What were some of the pros and cons of both? And I mean, I'm guessing you like play-by-play better, but I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great question because I get asked it all the time. First of all, my seat at the PA's spot on the press row is significantly better than where I broadcast from. When you're the PA announcer, you have the best seat in the house. I mean, you are just about mid-court, on the court level. In the NBA, there are only probably, of the 30 NBA buildings, there's probably only 4 or 5 places I get to call a game on the floor. The rest of them are either in the lower portions, the upper portions of the lower level, like we are in the broadcast deck at Toyota Center, or we're in locations where we're on the top 2 or 3 rows of the second deck, or in some cases, there are some places in the NBA that I feel that are just completely unacceptable for broadcasting games because of the location where they put us in. But by and large, I don't complain about that because I'm very, very lucky. I love calling play-by-play. I love being on the radio and painting a picture. So for me to piss and moan about where my broadcast spot is, I'm not going to do it because there'll be 500 guys that would be willing to take my spot tomorrow. But the biggest pro would be you are telling the drama on the radio. You're painting a picture for 2.5 hours. The biggest pro about the PA is being on the floor and trying to get a crowd of 16, 17, 18,000 people to react to what you're doing. They both have their pros and cons, but when the opportunity was presented to me years ago, when they said, hey, we're going to transition Bill to doing just home games, and ultimately when Bill retires, Craig will go full-time to television, you'll go to full-time to radio, I couldn't say no and was very, very happy to do that. So in my spot right now, I am as happy as can be because I get to travel the NBA. I get to call 82, hopefully maybe 92 NBA basketball games a year. And the money's good, so that's always a nice thing too. But ultimately, I as someone that grew up watching NBA basketball, pretending I was broadcasting these games, and now I get to do it as only, I think I'm only the 4th full-time play-by-play broadcaster in the history of the Rockets organization. I hold that in high regard and absolutely love doing it and don't want to ever give it up.
Yeah, and they put Fancy Matt up in 5-star hotels, and they put you on like the nicest plane in sports, right?
It's not bad. I'll be brutally honest. The one thing that's nice is that most teams don't have their own plane.
Right.
And we also have our same flight crew that we all know them by their name. They know us by our name. And so, it's 11:30 midnight and you're in Atlanta and you're about to go to Memphis or Charlotte or to anywhere else, Detroit, and you got an hour flight that's going to take you to that airport at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. You get down to your seat where you're going to sit every time, and there is your favorite beverage. In my case, it's unsweet tea with a pillow and a blanket sitting there for you. And it's a little bit of a creature comfort because the NBA travel is rigorous. You don't get to go somewhere for 3 or 4 days. Typically, you broadcast one game, you're in the night of, you leave right after, you go to the next city. So it's way different than broadcasting Major League Baseball, where you actually get to unpack your suitcase and put them in the drawers in the hotel. We are literally in one city and out on most occasions pretty quick.
And when you're at home, you typically have an analyst, either Adam Clanton or Adam Wexler. What's the biggest difference in working between the two of them, other than Adam Clanton has a greater propensity for checking you in on Facebook?
That's funny. I love working with both of those guys. They both bring different dynamics to it, but that's what they are on their radio show. So I wouldn't want this. If one of them said I'm quitting, the other one said I'm doing all 82, I'd be okay with that too. But they both enjoy doing it. They both like the flexibility. They don't have to be there with me for all 82 games. The home games are fun because I have another set of eyes that can watch the game, that can see something that I didn't see, and can chime in. Also, I will write some things down on my prep boards that I can get to, that I think can add to the broadcast, because those guys are talking. When you're doing a game by yourself on the road, I don't have much time to do that. I have to call what's in front of me, because if I stare down and look at a stat about, let's say, Dylan Brooks' career against the LA Clippers, where he averaged 14 points a game or averaged 19 points, whatever, or he had a career high 31 against him, I have to wait for a commercial break to do that, because if I look down and try to look at my numbers, I might miss something. So those guys are with me for all 82. They just are in the studio for the 41. And sometimes I get them involved with an instant replay that they may see that I won't be able to see. But typically, the easiest thing is with having them with me at home games, because, like I said, they can add a little anecdotal things to the broadcast. They're a second set of eyes, and they give me a chance to look down once in a while, and maybe you can get a sip of water in between a play call.
That's just great. I love the different. I would never imagine that those would be issues, or that would be something that would come up while you guys are broadcasting.
My most awkward moment, I appreciated how difficult of a job that is. So from time to time, I chip in the stats role on NBA radio broadcasts. And so I've done it for a few teams here and there. Probably the coolest experience I had was when I did it for Noah Eagle, who came up, Ian Eagle's son, with the Clippers. Now he's like the voice of NBC. People saw him on the Olympics this summer. I also used to do it with...
good, by the way. He's so good.
I used to do it with the Utah Jazz, because when I hosted Locked On Rockets back in the day, obviously David Locke, voice of the Jazz on radio, and so he would use his Locked On guys for stats if that's what they want to do. So I would chip in. Well, one time in the playoffs, it was one of those Jazz Rockets playoff series in 2018 or 2019, Donovan Mitchell had a nagging injury. It was the final minutes of, I think, a closeout game for the Rockets, and I was doing stats, and David was asking their analyst, who was on site but not with him, someone that was in the tunnel, and I thought they were live on air, and so I tweeted about the injury to Mitchell, and it turns out they were not live on air. It was during the prep process, and David, you should have seen his eyes, and I deleted it off Twitter. It was gone in 15 seconds. It's fine. It's no big deal. But that gave me a new appreciation for how difficult that job is when you're doing a live broadcast, that, you're going back and forth. It's not just the times that you're on air, Matt. It's also like the prep that goes on in those 90-second, 2-minute breaks that set up the next 10 minutes of dialogue, right?
Yeah, for sure. If there's a trend in the game, if there is what happened the previous game, like, there'll be a time where the Rockets, I know what it was last year. Do you remember how bad the Phoenix Suns were, guys, in the fourth quarter of games?
Yes.
And so that's one of those situations that I wanted to make sure I had the stats on, because the Phoenix Suns were notorious for giving up second half leads. And I believe the Rockets got a win in Phoenix after Phoenix had a huge lead in the game. So, just a little bit of opportunity to take a breath and look down and reference something. You just don't get much of that. The NBA timeouts are 2 minutes long. So, and by the way, I need to get a sip of water, because in football and basketball, you are literally calling 94 feet each direction. You can't take 5 to 10 seconds to skip and just watch the basketball being played. You got to describe every moment. At least a good play-by-play does. Where's the ball? Who's got it in his hand? Is he being guarded by somebody? Where is he on the floor? And so, it's you are literally taking dictation of something right in front of you, and it's fast, it's furious, and the little breaks you can get, whether it's during a commercial break, whether it's at halftime, or if you have a partner with you, can make a difference. But for play-by-play people, it's not necessarily a requirement to have a color analyst on the basketball radio broadcast, because again, the action moves so fast that if you've got somebody with you that talks in long sentences and gets into great detail, you're going to miss a lot of action. So I applaud both Adam and Adam for knowing when to get in and get out to say what they want to say and let me get back to calling the action.
And that's what's different about radio, even relative to TV, right? I assume in that respect, it can be even more challenging, because TV, you can occasionally take a break because the viewer can see what's going on in the background, as opposed to the radio, you are their only lifeline, right? I mean, you can't take a break just based on the nature of the format.
Yeah, it's funny. I think part of what makes Craig and Ryan so good on television is the fact they're very anecdotal on their broadcasts. They'll have something funny will be said about whether it's Hello Kitty or something they ate or when Ryan played. And while I'd love to do that myself, I just don't have much time for that. The only time I'd ever be able to throw anything anecdotal in would be probably during a free throw or coming out of a timeout. My responsibility is to paint the picture. And that's for people not only listening in Houston, but it's all on our radio network. And of course, there are lots of people in their cars with the emergence of Sirius XM radio that are driving from one end of the country to the other, or maybe just driving around on a particular night that want to catch an NBA game, and they want to hear it. They're not ready to hear Matt Thomas stories about how much fun it was to have a pizza in Orlando. They want to know if Dylan Brooks picked up his fourth foul or not.
Yeah, I'm 100% nerding out over this conversation. So I think I already told Ben, but I'm a huge, I really appreciate play-by-play people because to me, for example, I think Ben witnessed this with the Astros when. So I started watching every single Astros game the year they last won their
World Series 2022.
Yeah, the World Series, right? And there were so many iconic calls, and I remember talking to Ben about, obviously I'm from Europe, so I come from a background where I grew up watching football. I remember all of my favorite calls growing up from, really great goals or really great moments. I have all of those memories with, obviously with the Astros. There's obviously the NBA themselves have so many great, play-by-play guys on TV. I think it's a really underrated part of what makes sports special because you really associate great moments with what the play-by-play announcer is saying while it happens. Obviously, with James Harden, you have that card against the Golden State Warriors, the flamethrower one.
Right.
Everybody remembers those exact calls, and I think a bad play-by-play announcer can really ruin a moment, and you can don't want to insult anybody. Obviously, respects everybody that does it. But when you listen to, at least last year, when you listen to an Astros game on Apple TV or whatever it was, the play-by-play was so dead that it kind of made the game boring. I think PK obviously does such a great job with that. Just wanted to take the time to really say how much I value that role.
Thank you for saying that, because it's very important. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy since I was old enough to walk and talk. So I'm very critical of myself, but I'm also critical of people in our profession because, again, whether it's Division I basketball or it's the NBA or the NFL, I am a radio geek. I grew up in radio. I've been working in radio for over 30 years now, so I appreciate the art of it. It's lost, frankly. Television, streaming has taken away a lot of the luster of the call on radio, especially in football and in basketball. Baseball still has its niche of a hardcore radio group. I'll go into an example of this. Gene Peterson recently passed away, and he was one of my idols growing up, along with Model Hamilton. And, I remember listening as a junior high and in young days of my high school, listening to Gene call Rockets Radio. And, I love doing it because he loved doing it. But there's also a part of me that worries that I don't have a generation of people that were Matt Thomas in 1987, 88, 89 that are listening to radio like they are in 2024, 25, 26 down the road. So I kind of know where my landing spot is and where I am in terms of importance. The only thing that I get is that, while television is such a big part of broadcasting now, there are still people that have to get in their cars, that have to go pick up their kids from camp, or have to go to the grocery store, or have a late night shift, or are truck drivers that want to hear the games. And so I owe it to them to give it the same effort, regardless if I have 25,000 people listening or 2,500 people listening. So, I take it very, very seriously, knowing that the industry, the medium itself has changed, where, especially in, as I said, basketball and football, it is much more of a television medium than it would be on radio.
So I think Matt Thomas, the PA voice, everyone associates you with those iconic starting lineups from the 1990s when you were just a 20-something-year-old kid and you were first getting started. And you've told that story plenty of times. People can, Google Matt Thomas Rockets podcast and find a ton of content where you've described that in the past. We don't need to go into that today because I think most of our audience understands your role there. I think people also probably know in 2018 you had that iconic call of the Golden State Warriors intros on the other side of the excitement spectrum, literally nothing. And so from a PA standpoint, I think people know standout Matt Thomas moments. Because radio isn't quite as in sync with the social media era, I don't know if the Matt Thomas calls, especially because the Rockets the last few years haven't been as, I guess, buzzworthy as a lot of other teams. Let's just be blunt.
That's fair.
So what would you say your standout calls are? Is there one or two that stands out that you look back and say, hey, this was a really good call of a big moment that stands out to me?
Well, I wrestle with this all the time because, when Gene was calling games in the 90s, when radio was a bigger part of the NBA and not every game was televised, and there were games on pay-per-view, everybody knew how sweet it is, and that's how we ended it. I end every Rockets win on radio, just like I did at the Rockets when I did the PA. I will run my R and go, Rockets win. That's something that I've always done as a PA announcer, and I do it on my radio broadcast. As terms of my signature calls, I really only have two that I like to use. One is nothing but nylon. When I see a big three-pointer go in, it just goes right through the twine and doesn't move. I will use that usually once or twice a broadcast, and then I will say sets, fires, and hits on a big three-point shot. But again, I don't want to do that every single time because I think if you do that, then you become a cliche machine, and I don't want no one that's listening to my broadcast thinking I'm doing that. But as far as the big moments, Eric Gordon, I think in my first or second year, hit a three-pointer at Philadelphia on a baseline to win a game.
During the 2017 World Series, by the way, the game that a lot of people didn't watch because of that.
I've done a lot of those games. I've done a lot of games opposite Astros playoff games, that's for sure. And then I think when James Harden scored 60 in Philadelphia, I think I called a pretty good game on that one at a moment. I will say this, and this is purely egotistical, but if you ask my fellow NBA broadcasters the exact same thing, they would say, yeah, Matt, I do this as well. ESPN does a show called SportsCenter All Night that if you ever listen to ESPN radio, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they'll always have their top 5 plays. And so we'll go, let's say we have a game in Chicago and we'll fly home and I get back to hobby at, 1:45, 2 o'clock in the morning. And at about 5 till each hour, they go to the SportsCenter top 5. And I kind of pat myself on the back if I make the ESPN top 5 because I know that A, the Rockets won, and B, it was a good call. So that kind of gives me a little bit of an ego boost. And like, not that I need it because I josh how much fun I live my life, but it's nice to be recognized in an area where, again, if I walk the arena at Toyota Center, there are people that know me for my radio show. They knew me as a PA announcer for the Hakeem years and for the the years that I was doing it at Toyota Center. And obviously, you were talking about the Golden State game. I'd like to be recognized as much for my Rockets radio play-by-play, but the reality is that it's a sport that people want to see in person and they want to see it on television.
Sure.
I just want to take 30 seconds just to say that you were talking about how radio maybe lost a little bit of space to TV. I'll just maybe this will cheer you up, but here in Portugal, we are 95% football/soccer, whatever you call it, and what they do here is. They take, even on TV, they take the radio broadcast and they play the audio over the TV clips because the radio broadcast is so much more iconic for the people here. And because growing up, that, sports TV was expensive, so a lot of people, only kept up with the radio version of big events. And so that's usually what they do because, everybody recognizes that the radio feed is usually a better play-by-play than what's going on TV. That being said, and moving on to the question that I originally wanted to ask before we went on this massive tangent, although it was worth it, we had Vanessa on, and we talked about funny stories that she might have from the rest of the guys, obviously Ryan and Craig.
Her fun fact about you, by the way, was that you don't know any music post 1992. True?
Absolutely true. I will say my wheelhouse is 1973 to 1983. Now, while I've listened to other songs, of course, I have a Swiftie for a daughter, so I have to hear Taylor Swift in my house half the time. But if you're going to look at my phone and we listen to music on the plane, I like to put the earphones on and try to go to sleep, especially in the night flights. Probably 90% of my catalog in my iPhone is songs between those years. So, yeah, I would not say I'm very hip to today's music scene.
Yeah, by the way, I definitely respect that. I only listen to music older than me, and I was born in 2001. So, it's not exactly the same.
2001?
I was. I want to ask if you have any revenge stories since Vanessa talked about your music tastes. Do you have any revenge stories about her or Craig and Ryan, obviously?
I don't have revenge stories. We are very close as a broadcast unit. There are a lot of teams in the NBA that I have been told that don't have the same relationship we have with all of us, whether it's professional jealousy or it's just a vibe. Craig, Vanessa, Ryan, and myself get along really, really, really well. We try to have dinner at least once a road trip. Now, all of us will have family and friends in other cities, or, I like to go to the casino when I'm in other cities. So sometimes I will beg out on dinner to go play some blackjack. But generally speaking, we do hang out quite a bit together. I should also mention Adrian Chavarria, our Spanish announcer. We're all one big family, and we really enjoy it. And I think you have to be, because we are with each other so much of the time. And this is not a slight against the players, but these players are between the ages of, say, 19 and 29 years old. They don't necessarily want to hang out with Matt and Craig, who are adults with families and kids and whatnot. And Vanessa's got her own life, and Ryan's, retired player. And while he's going to connect to some of those players because he played in the league for as long as he did, there's still going to be a little separation. Not that they are inclusive and don't involve us in anything. They're all very polite and nice to us, but they're just not going to be people that we hang out with. So we as broadcasters tend to navigate to hang out with each other more than just like anybody else would. As far as funny stories, I tease Craig about the fact he only works like 85 days a year. So he has a lot of downtime. I saw him at the Rockets unveiling of their facility a couple days ago, and I think that's the first time he's actually put on a pair of pants in probably 6 months, since he doesn't work except for the Rockets games. Ryan Hollins eats more food than anybody I've ever seen in my entire life. We will go eat. He will get multiple appetizers, multiple entrees, and desserts. So if we're going at a restaurant and Vanessa's dinner is 25, mine's 30, Craig's is 30, Ryan will be in the 50 to 55, $60 range because he orders so much food, and he eats it all. And it's amazing that one man at 7 feet tall, as skinny as he is, can consume as much food as he does. As far as Vanessa's concerned, she's very, very funny. We get along great. We sit next to each other on the plane, where I will have a rando song on my iPhone at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'll tap her on the shoulder and I'll say, "Do you know this song?" And 9 times out of 10, she knows it, which is, I'm very impressed. She grew up in a music family when she was growing up in Terre Haute, Indiana. So I really appreciate her eclectic style in music. But in terms of crazy stories, nothing really too super crazy that I could tell you over the pod. We've had some good times, but some of those good times need to be kind of held in our own private lockbox, so to speak. So, but
Fair.
We get along great, and I love working with them, and it's going to be fun getting with them on the road again this season.
She said she's best at karaoke. Do you agree with that?
The reason why she won the karaoke contest is because her songs were more current than mine, but I am the best singer. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind I'm the best singer, hands down. And by the way, Ryan Hollins and I, Ryan's favorite dinner to eat on the road is stir fry. He could go to a Benihana 4 times on a road trip if he wanted to. He's always asking me to go eat stir fry. We're in Denver, stir fry. Is there a stir fry place in Sacramento? I have to, anytime we go to a city, I have to find out if there's a stir fry place. And don't tell Ryan this, but sometimes I tell him there's no stir fry in a city when there really is, because I like stir fry. I just don't want it multiple times on a road trip.
All right, so as we wind down our conversation, I want to transition back to your other job. Unlike Craig, you do not work just 85 days a year because, as mentioned leading off this episode, you also host the Matt Thomas Show daily, noon to 3 on SportsTalk 790. You can stream at sports790.com. And there's an interesting juxtaposition for you, or at least I think it is, in that you are paid by the Rockets. You have incredible ties with this organization, obviously in the Tilman era, but really going back all the way to Les Alexander, as you mentioned earlier. This is 30 plus years. They are your baby in a sense. And yet it feels like in this era of Houston sports, they're a little bit of an afterthought. Now, some of that I think would happen in any market because when a team goes into a rebuild, the depths of which the Rockets went into earlier this decade, then people aren't going to talk about them as much. But in this market, not only is football a big deal, well, pretty much football is a big deal no matter where you are these days in America, but the Astros drive MLB discussion in a way that I feel like almost no other market gets the level of baseball talk that Houston does. And that's a good problem to have because obviously the run the Astros have been on, 2 World Series titles, 4 American League titles in the last 7 years. Hopefully they're about to add another this year. We'll see what happens in October. Congratulations to the Astros clinching a 7th straight full season AL West title. But because of that, there are only so many segments. There's only so much oxygen, so to speak, for a sports talk radio discussion. And so I know you don't get to talk Rockets as much as you would like because there are all these other interests going on. So my question for you is this. What is it going to take for the Rockets to become more culturally relevant in the Houston sports scene, the way they were in the 90s, in the 2000s, even for a lot of the 2010s, although I think, maybe the peak James Harden years were a little bit overshadowed because it coincided with the Astros getting to that World Series level for the first time. Like when I go back to the 90s, one of the little niche conversations among, diehard Houston sports fans that I think people outside the market might not realize, you talked earlier about how it's not just about Michael Jordan or Hakeem Olajuwon or Magic Johnson, that it's about a team. And so these discussions from the 90s about, what would have happened if Michael Jordan didn't retire? Well, no, I think if you're a diehard Rockets fan or if you're just a diehard Houston sports fan, you know that second year, well, first off, Jordan came back during the season. He lost to the Magic, and the Magic then got swept by the Rockets in the 95 finals. But what was different about that Bulls team, they had lost Horace Grant, and it was before they had added Dennis Rodman. And so they were not as good of an overall team, even if they did have Michael Jordan. That's why they lost to the Magic. And then, of course, the Magic were swept by the Rockets in the NBA Finals. And that was a type of conversation that back in the day wasn't just discussed amongst diehard NBA fans. It was more a part of the broader conversation, a fabric of the city. As opposed to now, it feels like we're having those conversations on Rockets Podcast, on Rockets Twitter, and Rockets Reddit, and these super niche outlets. But in terms of the more mainstream, it feels like those narratives are more limited to baseball and football. So in terms of potentially changing that, is making the playoffs enough? Is it going to take until the Rockets actually contend for a title? Would it take them actually winning a title? What does it take to get the Rockets back into, the general consciousness of the average Houston sports fan to where those types of conversations are playing out, not just on Rockets podcasts like this, but on the Matt Thomas Show daily from noon to 3?
First and foremost, I have been very blessed to work for an incredible company in iHeartMedia that has said, Matt, you do your show. And I'm not going to make you talk about one team for 55 minutes of 60 minutes of an hour. I wouldn't want to do that show. I wouldn't want to be forced to do that show. I wouldn't do that show.
You want to talk about the backup Texans offensive line?
That doesn't interest me. Now, if a team like the Texans was to go off to a 11-2 start, they're number one seed in the playoffs, and they're going to go towards the Super Bowl, then obviously you got to play the hits, guys. And I don't understand why people don't understand that. And I don't know if it's because that you're being forced because of ownership or management or programming, but I want to listen to a show where I don't get the same thing over and over and over. I like to get into a variety of different things. I do like talking about college football when need be and when Texans are going. And certainly when we carry the Astro games, they're a huge part of our show. And I love talking about the Astros because as a 7 or 8 year old, guys, I was an Astros fan, an Oilers fan, and a Rockets fan. 2 of those 3 teams are still around. And regardless of if I have a microphone in front of me, I'm still a fan of those teams. The addition of me being the voice of the Rockets, and this will be between the 2 teams, between the 2 different decades. I think it's my 11th year with the Rockets organization. I have a vested interest in their success. But the Rockets have been fantastic. They said, Matt, we know that we are not page one. We're not going to ask you to force feed your audience conversation about our team. When we're good, people will come and gravitate towards our product again. And that, to me, in the most simplistic way, is the answer to your question. We play the hits. If the Rockets are 50-32 this year and are a 4 seed in the playoffs, we're talking a lot of NBA basketball. If the Rockets are 20-60 and thinking about being a top 3 lottery pick, it ain't getting on the radar. The Rockets understand that. My audience knows that. My programmers know that at the radio station. And so that's how you've been able to be what the Matt Thomas show is we're going to do things that you are at a bar talking with your buddies about. And I hope, desperately, boys, the Rockets become a bar tab conversation because I'm with this team. I have some inside knowledge because I'm with them every single day. I'm not trying to brag about the knowledge. I'm just saying that I want to use it. I want to say, hey, I saw this at practice today. This was interesting. Or this happened before the game. Or I talked to Ime and he said this. But if I get into a deep head first conversation about the Rockets and they've lost 9 in a row, I'm going to lose my radio audience. And the Rockets understand that. And the radio station understands that. So as the Matt Thomas show has been around since January of 2010, I wanted to talk about what hits. And when the Rockets hit, guess what? I want to be the place that people in Houston go to talk Rockets over and over and over again. And hopefully that's going to be happening in the not too distant future.
Yeah, and I think it's largely going to resolve itself, and that the Astros, I'm not going to say they're going to fall off by 2025, 2026. Hopefully you don't see something like the late 2000s. But I do think that this era, they're clearly on, let's call it the back side of it. Not saying that they're imminently going to fall off. Obviously, they have Altuve, Yordan under contract, yada, yada. But over the next few years, as the Rockets are getting better and hopefully getting back to a contending level, I don't know that it's reasonable to expect the Astros to be quite where they are right now. And so because of that, that may shift the conversations a little bit over the upcoming years and sort of resolve this just based on the normal cycle of contention and rebuild that accompanies, competitive sports where 30 teams are all trying to be the last standing. And so obviously it's very difficult to be at a peak level every single season on a consistent basis. Matt, before we close out the pod, one other topic I wanted to bring up. So you were in New York within the last week or so for the annual broadcast meetings, right?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a lot of things in the company that basically it's the league prepping you guys so that everybody's on the same page going into game broadcast for the upcoming season, right?
Yeah, it's just basically practices, not practice, like, what you do in a broadcast, conversation pieces, the state of the league, what's happening. We got a nice officials rundown of some changes, some things. There was a symposium with 3 different referees talking about their lives and how they deal with certain things. There was a conversation about PR directors and our relationship with team broadcasters. The break area where just us radio guys got together. But it's just kind of a 2-day, very informal get-together to kind of say, here's where we are as a league. We also got a chance to see a video of presentation of the new Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, which looks spectacular. And I can't wait to get there for our first game there. But it's just kind of an opportunity for all 30 teams, broadcasters, and PR departments to kind of get together in one building.
Well, see, I wanted to ask you about the officiating component because for a diehard fan of officials, like everyone knows Ben Dubose is, what should I be on the lookout for this year?
The continued relationship building between officials and the players. Zach Zarba, Bill Kennedy, and I forgot who the third referee was. Oh, Josh Tibbin said, look, we don't want to get into a bad relationship with players. We want to get the calls right. We want these games to be decided. And we do everything in our power to check our egos at the door when we walk in the arena, because we want to call these games. We don't want officials deciding these basketball games. And I really believe those guys. So the three guys they happen to choose are three of the most respected guys in the league. They talked about their relationship with the younger officials and how they want to work with younger officials because they were once young officials and they want to instill their knowledge and situation and temperament to those. So, the rules are going to be the rules. The challenge system isn't really changing, but I just get the sense that they want to be even further away from the limelight. They want the games decided. They are pro replay. They are pro looking at things. They are pro Secaucus, New Jersey Replay Center. These gentlemen and ladies want to get the call right because the last thing they want to do, and I can clearly tell you that none of them are on social media because they said that would be the professional suicide if they did that. But they just want to get these calls right. And I respect the hell out of them. It's a very difficult position. It's the most difficult officiating position in sports. And that's why when you listen to me on Rockets Radio, you will very, very rarely ever hear me criticize them because, again, I think it's so tough. You can't go back and autocorrect by and large. And, you may have missed a call on one end, and then 5 seconds later, you're making another call on the other end. It's a thankless job, and I applaud their efforts, and I try to give them the benefit of the doubt every chance I can get.
Yeah, and to your point on replay, they're expanding it this year. One change they recently announced is that when there's an out-of-bounds call, you can look not just at who it went off,
yes,
but if a foul caused it. Because historically, I think what's happened a lot of the time is there'll be these split the difference calls where maybe there's a foul, but they don't want to call the foul. And then when you go to replay, you can review who it last touched, but you can't review the foul that wasn't called. And so the replay can sort of lead to a very unjust result, as opposed to now, you can actually call the foul. And so it's going to be a result that I think is more sort of justified.
Yeah. Simplify it. If the ball goes off of Dylan Brooks' hands, why did it go off his hands? Because Victor Wembanyama slapped him across the wrist. They can now call the ball on Victor. So that's the one thing I think is, why did the ball go off the player's hands? Because of contact. They can now call that contact, which I think is a great decision on their part.
Yeah. Well, I do like that you pointed out the relationship between officials and players. I think that's so important because everyone that follows me on Twitter knows my biggest trigger by far, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox. I know we need to wind down the conversation, but I cannot stand the amount of silly ejections that happen in MLB and the NBA, because at the amount that leagues and teams are asking fans to pay for tickets and the amount of time that they are asking fans to commit to these leagues, there's more content, there's more games than ever before. The incredibly quick trigger fingers are uncalled for in many cases. And it's not that different than, in football and soccer. The dialogue between players and coaches is not that different. It's just sort of understood that in a sport with fewer games, there's a certain bar that needs to be cleared for it to be worthy of, I'm going to literally take the player out of this game to where fans can enjoy seeing him play, which is what in many cases they paid to do. As opposed to, I think culturally in a sport like baseball or basketball, there's so many games that some of the more old school officials can want to make an example out of, hey, if you're not treating the officials right, then I'll throw you out to try and set a tone. And I'm not saying that players are innocent in this. They're not. Players can engage more respectively. Respectfully, it's a two-way street. But I think the bottom line is, if we can have fewer ejections over hurt feelings, then I think the overall product is going to be better. And so, again, it's not to say that it's all on the officials. The players can do things to bolster those relationships to where they aren't as contentious in the first place. But the bottom line is, having a better relationship between officials and players makes for a better product, because you're going to hopefully have less ejections, have players out on the court more frequently. And I think that's sort of what they're getting at, right?
Couldn't agree more. They want players on the floor. They want the stars determining the game, and they're going to try to give as much leeway as possible. Now, if these officials are berated and called names,
sure,
they've got no other choice. But I think that hopefully will be a downtrend because I think the players want to be on the floor. They don't want to be paying fines. They don't want to cause their teams ejections and handicap their teams.
Well, I think that's everything for me. Paolo, did you have anything else before we close up shop?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to spark a rant here or not. I was going to ask about the wave and what Matt thinks of the wave at Toyota Center, because here in Portugal it's pretty popular and nobody has a problem with it.
All right, I'm going to have dinner. I'm going to let you guys go because we're not having this conversation.
Okay. Wavebusters HOU on Twitter, right?
Yes, I'm over 1,000 people. Follow it. Wavebusters HOU. The wave must end. Ben, spread the word.
Will do. All right, folks, that is Matt Thomas. You can follow him at SportsMT on Twitter/X. And of course, as mentioned, you can listen to the Matt Thomas Show on SportsTalk 790 or at sports790.com each weekday from noon to 3 p.m. Central. Matt, thanks so much for the time.
Guys, call me anytime. Take care now.
Sounds good. All right, and that'll do it for today's show. For myself and Paolo, if you want to follow us on Twitter/X, you can do so at Ben Dubose or at Paolo Alves NBA, and this show at The Logger Line, or if you hit up the link tree in the bio, you can find links to, obviously, distributors, Apple, Google, Spotify. Subscribe, leave a positive review if you have not already, but also friends of the program, sponsors, Carbach Brewing, Sports Talk 790, USA Today's Rockets Wire. Consume their content. That would help us as well. We would greatly appreciate it. I'm sure they would as well. All right, that will do it for today. For Paolo and Matt, I'm Ben Dubose. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Logger Line.